Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. I'm going to show you such an exciting game played between Levon Aronian and Rameshbabu Praggnanandhaa. This is tremendous stuff. It was played in the FTX Crypto Cup. Sounds very sinister, but actually it's very exciting. The latest Play Magnus online rapid event taking place in Miami. This was such great fun. There's a 22-year age gap between these players. Aronian is 39 years old. Praggnanandhaa just turned 17. And Prag on fine form at the moment. He scored 6.5 out of 9 in the Chennai Olympiad for the Indian second team with a rating performance of 27.67. Doing great stuff. Levon, well, he didn't have such a great Olympiad. Anyway, let's see what happened here. This is the fourth game in their mini match. First two games drawn. Prag won the third, so Aronian had to win this game to take it into a tiebreak. Now, what's interesting is how Prag handles this opening. So it's in English. Knight f3. Now here, knight c6 is the normal move for black. You might think that just needing a draw, Prag would just kind of keep things very steady. But no, he goes for this crazy pawn sacrifice. Now we've already seen this. I showed you a game that Adiban, Prag's teammate in Chennai, actually, that's interesting. Adiban played this with black. In the Olympiad, they had a crazy game that ended in a draw. So this pawn sacrifice, it's such a brazen idea. You're just giving away this pawn just to gain a bit of time against the knight. And then you keep chasing it with good old Harry. If that pawn is blocked, then bishop d6 is a bit awkward for the knight. So e3, this is exactly the same as the Adiban game. So, white is a little bit up behind in development. I mean, obviously these bishops are blocked. The knight is sort of being pushed around. But it's a clear pawn and white has a very healthy pawn structure. If the queens were exchanged here, you just say, oh yeah, well, white's a pawn up and black has a weak d-pawn. But with the queens on the board, it's a different matter. And interesting that Prag follows exactly the strategy that Adiban employed in the Olympiad. Bring this queen out at a very early stage, just wants to put it on g6 to hassle that pawn on g2. Sort of disrupting the sort of smooth flow of white's development. And if you remember that game that Adiban played, went knight c3, queen g6, and well, it was a mad game. And indeed, Aronian and Praggnanandhaa in their second game in this match, it also followed knight c3 and queen g6, but in this fourth game, Aronian played bishop d2. You've got to think Aronian must have been delighted to see this variation on the board again. Remember, Aronian is in a must-win situation. So, such a sharp game is going to suit him. So bishop d2 played, bishop d6, a3, very calm, just preventing any piece from coming to b4, so just controlling the pieces. Bishop f5. So at least black has very easy development in this line. Rook c1 and rook d8. I wonder whether with rook c1 Aronian might have been thinking that Prag was perhaps toying with the idea of castling queenside. But rook c1, after rook c1, that feels a bit too much to put the king on the queen side. In any case, rook d8. Now that is just to do with maybe supporting this d pawn, maybe, well, just putting the rook in the middle anyway. Knight c3. What's interesting is actually, I mean, maybe at first Pragg was intending putting the bishop back to b8, but then just thought, well, maybe this bishop develops very easily. I don't know. In any case, Pragg continued with the Adiban maneuver, putting the queen on g6, supports the bishop down this diagonal, but basically just hits g2, preventing this bishop from developing. Therefore, queen f3. So that protects the g-pawn and prepares bishop e2. And if bishop g4, then that pawn actually can be taken in the middle. So Pragg plays another disrupting move, h3. And if that's taken, then queen e6 is a bit annoying, with the idea knight takes d4 and perhaps later on bishop takes h3. So after h3, Aronian just kept everything closed with g3. And now bishop g4 hits the queen. Queen takes d5 and castles queenside. Excuse me, castles kingside. I'm losing the plot. By the way, if bishop takes g3, then queen e4 check exchanges queens. Of course, that's exactly what Aronian wants. He's under pressure. He would like to exchange queens. So that's why castles was played. Such an interesting position. Pragg is 2 pawns down. However, look at black's pieces. All black's pieces are so active. The rook is about to come to e8. The pawn on h3 plays its part as well. It means that white's king really can't guarantee safety on the king side, because there could be, a mating net. So how do you play? Well, I mean, queen e4 is possible, but the problem is after bishop f5, this could lead to a repetition very quickly. And remember, Pragg just needs a draw to win this 4-game mini-match. So Aronian played the queen to b5. I mean, it looks reasonable anyway to get the queen out. You're 2 pawns up. But just watch the compensation that black has here. I would say this opening has been a success already. Rook on the same file as the king. Knight takes d4 threatened, and actually it's very difficult to defend against that successfully. Bishop e2. But now knight takes d4, crashing in. That's got to be taken. And now rook takes. So now Pragg is a whole rook down. However, he has a great follow-up here. Queen e4. Now, white better not castle. There we go. The mating net. Queen g2 mate. In the meantime, that rook is attacked. If rook g1, then all we need to do, black just needs to get rid of the white. Queen a6, b5. The queen gets pushed away, and then queen takes knight is mate. So this is already such a terrifying position for white to play. And remember, this is a rapid play game, so really not easy to defend. Bishop g5. Okay, this is kind of improvisation. If the queen takes the rook, then bishop takes rook. Well, okay, that's worked out well for white. So rook e8 takes the rook away from the bishop and increases the pressure. So the bishop has to come back. And now the queen gets pushed. And now Pragg takes the rook in the corner. In fact, queen f3 is a really powerful move, and this should be winning for black. I mean, that's a very difficult move to see in, when you're playing very, very quickly. Of course, the obvious move is to take the rook, and that's what Pragg did. But queen f3, just watch this for a moment. Let's just go through this. After queen takes b5, here's the move. Rook takes bishop. And then you take the rook. And then take the pawn on h2. Now white is so tied up here that in fact black should be winning. You move the queen out of the way and then push the h-pawn. Fascinating stuff. It's incredible how well this has turned out for black. But in the game, Pragg made the obvious capture. And then, well, if queen takes pawn, then queen takes bishop. That should be good for white. But now he brought the queen back. Hits the knight here, rook e1. Queen f6, and now things start to go off the rails a bit for Pragg, because Aronian has survived this attacking wave. And what's the score? Aronian is back to being 2 pawns up, and now he centralizes the queen. And yeah, this is now tough for black. If the queen moves back maybe here, then you can swipe another pawn. But this is where Pragg, I think, plays very cleverly. He somehow finds a way to keep the initiative going. Pawn to b4. So if queen takes queen, of course you throw in pawn takes knight, check, and then recapture. So that has to be taken. Now queen f6. b5. Now just adding a third pawn means that, well, white's position is just a little bit open. Bishop b4. The computer will tell you that white is winning this position, but you try and prove that in an over-the-board game when you're running short of time. When I say over the board, it's funny. The players are staring at each other, or just staring at computer screens just over a desk. It's quite weird actually. But this is modern day esports. You take a look at the coverage. You'll find it on Chess24. Anyway, bishop b4 played. Rook a1 activates the rook. Bishop f3 hits the queen. Queen b3. Looks like white has everything covered. Hits the bishop, which goes back. b6, the pawn is rolling on. So the bishop comes back to b7 to block. d5, the next pawn advances. Now, how do you play with black in this position? And I think Pragg's next move is excellent. Tell you what, I'll flip the board and you have a little think with black. I'll have a little slurp of tea, you have a little think. How do you somehow try to drum up chances for black in this position? Or, I don't know, even drum up chances. Just, keep the game alive. Because in this position, the computer will tell you white has a winning position. Cheers, quick slurp of tea. Black to play. I'll flip the board back. Bishop c5 played by Pragg. This doesn't change the computer assessment. White is winning here, according to the machine. But bishop c5 I like, because that bishop is just holding the king and the king side together. And exchanging those bishops at least puts a little bit of doubt in Aronian's mind. And at this point, Aronian played, you could say, the safe move. If you feed this into a machine, it will tell you that rook a7 is winning. But that's not an easy move to play, because it leaves the king a little bit exposed, and that queen could get in, hassling the king, perhaps taking here. So for example, like this, well, you can give a check straight away, but let's hold the bishop for a moment. Now queen f2. Now you can understand why Aronian wants to avoid this when there are lots of checks available and that pawn could be taken. This looks scary. You know, there's this thing, when you've got the advantage, you just want to kind of hold the position. You want to maintain your advantage rather than, you know, plunging in. And that's very understandable. It'd be impossible to calculate this whole variation when you're, you know, short of time. But it should be winning. Let me just demonstrate how. But it relies on calculating and tempi. But the computer sees this in a flash, that actually white gets there because after the pawn queens, you queen with check, and that's winning. Human could never calculate that. Aronian played what looks like a safe move. He's 3 pawns up. You know, why risk? But watch what happens. Takes, takes. Now the rook is ready to defend on the second rank. Bishop a6. Great move from Pragg. That's the kind of move that you think, oh, well, there must be a way out of that. But actually, now it's not so clear. That covers the e2 square. Computer still thinks that white is better, but now it's far from obvious why. And suddenly, Pragg is back in the game. Still 2 pawns down, but this is getting very messy. Try to defend against that one. Where is that king going to? Classic situation where one side has a king that's insecure and the other side has a safe king. And you know, every time that can lead to trouble. Rook is ready to hit the a file. Rook d1 played, bishop b3, rook d1, blunder. It's not that this rook can be taken, that might actually give white some chances. It's the fact that this bishop sets up a kind of mating net. Of course, you don't want to take the rook here. That bishop is just an important attacking piece, and here white is lost. King d2 played, trying to, you know, run away with the king. But rook takes c3 is an efficient kill. Because if pawn takes, queen takes pawn check. And you take the rook. And of course this is completely winning. Let's put the bishop back there. Super chunky, defended and defending the pawn here. And black is just a clear piece up with a winning position. Wow, what a turnaround. But I say a turnaround. Pragg found ways to keep the position alive all the way through. And in fact, I mean, from the opening, he had a winning position. I think this opening variation, I'm definitely going to be looking at in my next Patreon opening survey, because this is really dangerous. Another example where black managed to get a really dangerous initiative. So that meant that Pragg won the mini match against Aronian, and he's now got 100% or maintains his 100% score in the tournament. Carlsen also has 100%. They're leading the tournament. I think there are still 3 rounds to go. Yeah, 3 rounds to go. It's an all 8 players. So Carlsen and Pragg, who's going to win out? I'll keep you posted on what's happening. Thanks for watching.